It's my pleasure to both say good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, because I know we've got people joining us from literally all over the globe today. But it's my huge pleasure to be able to welcome you all to today's Asia-Pacific Stats Café. I'm Rachel Bevan, Director of Statistics Division at ESCAP in Bangkok. And this is actually our first Stats Café of 2023. I know we've gone into March, so it's been a little while since we've actually had a session, but that's really because there were a lot of other webinars going on for UN Statistical Commission, and we wanted to make sure we let people attend those. So that's why we got off to a little bit of a late start, but I'm really pleased today that we've actually got this great Stats Café lined up. And can I just remind everybody, we're recording today's session. That's so that other people can actually watch it again afterwards. Also, if you're not speaking, just keep your microphone on mute. So you've all seen the title for today, but what we're looking at really today is about how we can build inclusive and open data systems. And in the past, we've talked a lot about the need for disaggregated data to ensure it covers all vulnerable groups. But actually, to be truly inclusive, we need to go so much further than just disaggregating the data which exists. We need to actually look at the design, the collection, and the use of data so that we can really ensure that the data we have actually meets the needs, priorities, and the experiences of all people. So today we're going to be using a data values lens, and we'll be exploring the concept of agency. So we're looking at the ability of individuals and communities to shape the design, production, governance, and use of data. We're also looking at how it can influence and support data systems. But at the same time, we also want to look at how a lack of agency in data can actually perpetuate existing inequalities and actually further marginalize certain groups, particularly groups like the youth, women, persons with disabilities. But today, I'm not going to say very much because, as ever, we've got a great lineup of speakers, and I want to make sure we give as much time as possible to them to actually talk to you a lot more about their experiences. We do want the session, though, to be as interactive as we can possibly be. So please, as we go through the session, it's great if you can post your questions, but also your comments in the chat bar. As we're kind of going through it and you're listening to different speakers, hopefully it will kind of really spark particular thoughts, you know, amongst the participants. So for all of you, this is really the chance to say what you all think. We don't have time to hear from everyone formally with just an hour, but actually you can share your thoughts in the chat bar. So please, I really want to encourage you to try and do that, because we will gain so much more if we can hear from a wider group of people. But it's my pleasure today to be able to introduce Karen Bett from the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data, and she's going to tell you a lot more about the work which they've been doing on data values, and she'll be moderating today's session and introducing you to all of the other speakers. So without further ado, I'll pass over to you, Karen. I'm really looking forward to hearing from all the speakers. Thanks very much. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Rachel, and greetings to everyone who is on this call, and as Rachel mentioned, from all over the globe. So I'm joining from Nairobi. It's 8 a.m. where I am, and I know some people are having their lunch and others just had their dinner. But this is a really interesting and good conversation that the Global Partnership has been leading on data values, and we wanted to use this moment to share what we mean in data values, and in particular on agency and inclusive data systems. So for today, we have a few sessions that will be running in the hour. After my introduction, I'll invite Mayuri, Dumal, and June back to talk about data values and agency. And Mayuri and June are our data values advocates, and they'll be, talking about what it means to them. And then we'll move into a conversation between a young person and an NSO from Nepal, Bipana and Keshab. We'll have an exchange on what it means for an NSO to think about inclusive data processes and what it means for a young person like Bipana to be part of that process. And then, of course, we'll wrap up with a Q&A. And just to add that, we'll also have a Q&A right after Mayuri and June's presentation. So let's get started, and I'll just give a little bit of reflection on why data values and why agency matters. And Rachel, you did a good job sort of setting the scene and why why agency and what agency is, the way we understand it. But, thinking about how we design data systems and how we produce it, the way we do it actually has implications for how people feel empowered or represented or having the confidence to participate in that process. And this is what we call agency, that people feel that they have the power, they have the right, and they have the ability to be part of that process, not just in the data collection, but actually in how data is designed, to the way data is collected, even determining the questions that they'll be asked, and even how the data is used and the decisions that are made after that. And we find that, top-down approaches in data production is what minimizes or, reduces agency, but inclusive approaches, sort of maximizes the potential and maximizes the agency of people. So really, agency is giving that opportunity for people so that their voices, their perspectives, their experiences, and their interests are reflected in the data on their own terms. And as I said, inclusive approaches, are what helps to build or promote that data agency. You may ask, so what are inclusive approaches? And my next slide will just unpack three features of inclusive data systems. I won't read through them, but I'll just run through the three features that inclusive data systems should have, and I'll also give some examples. Representation, I would say this is like the basic, the bare minimum, where we disaggregate the data by different forms of, different dimensions, whether it's income, whether it's disability, or even where they live. And disaggregation then enables people to be included for the first time in official statistics, but it also enables us to identify, best practices, so that even when the people in the statistical, offices or the data producers are no longer in that office, that's sustained. So if we are disaggregating data by migratory status, then that should not change, depending on the person who is in office. So it's also ensuring that representation is baked into the systems, and it doesn't change over time, or it doesn't, get deprioritized. So that's one. The second one is on co-creation, where, we include communities right from the design stage, right from determining that we need the data, all the way to the point where we're making decisions about, using the data. So co-creation really is involving communities through the entire data value chain. And, the best examples that we've seen, of course, within the statistics communities, using focus group discussion, cognitive testing of surveys, and also citizen generated data. The last feature is review, where, of course, sometimes it's not possible to include all the people all the time in all the discussions. So how do you manage this? We create, working arrangements so that the communities have representation in a smaller group. And, that smaller group then can provide the quality, review or quality standards for collecting data on that specific population. So, for example, the Washington group and the other city groups would be review arrangements, but also thinking about, ways that we disaggregate or analyze data beyond just disaggregation. So looking at that intersectional approach and also multidimensional assessment of data helps to, take that review perspective. So that's enough about what agency is. I know we're now excited to listen to June and Mayuri, who I'll just pass the mic to now to talk about, what data values means to them and the context that they live in. And June and Mayuri, the mic is yours. You'll have about 5 minutes.
Hello, thank you for this opportunity. And I'm Mayuri from India, and I'm a data values advocate, as introduced earlier. Um while recently she has talked about agency and how data should be inclusive. I would like, can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah, thank you. So I would like to talk about how marginalization looks like in Asia and Pacific region, as we are talking about this region today. And there will be many examples from me which will be related to India, as I am from India, but we can't generalize them for this region, but I would use them to set a context, like as India is a part of this region, and we can check how marginalization looks like here, because these all countries have faced colonization in the history, and colonization has a very deep rooted impact on this, like on marginalization of people of Asia and Pacific. This region also has highest diversity of race, ethnicity, religion, and culture, as we can see. It is highly prone to face the issues of marginalization by some powerful communities here, such as who are in majority in the countries. Like in India, Hindus are in the majority, and other minorities feel the suppression and oppression by these majorities. Uh, Historic illiteracy is the another important reason of marginalization here. Uh, uh, that in turns into denied access to power because of illiteracy. It is denied basic facilities and such as education and health, due to cultural caste and class or cultural regulations. It has made this marginalization severe. Like we can take into consideration the intersections of class, caste, and minority, and gender, etc. Because intersections are most of the times go unheard or are missed while collecting the data or looking at data, and this automatically reduces the agency of communities or marginalized people, because their voices are not heard or they are missing from the data. So eventually it suppress the communities. Today, as a first generation learner from my family, like I am the first generation learner, or a woman who is educated, I can understand how data impacts our lives. And like me, there are number of marginalized youth or women or girls are there who are facing these issues because of historic illiteracy in the families or communities. Uh, so this is how hegemony of colonization or supremacy of some classes or races have impacted lives of marginalized communities. Uh, Here I would like to go to the next slide, where we can talk about how data plays a role in this. So sorry, I have done with these points, so we can go to the next slide. Yeah, so how data does impact on our lives. Next slide, please. Yeah, so as here you can say exclusion in census is there. So in the context of India, governments have colonial mindsets while taking this censuses, as here it started in that era. So perspectives to pursue data are still same. There is no caste census happening here, despite of having thousands of castes that are there, and they are not included in censuses. So that exclusion happens. This shades light on how intersections go unconsidered again, because they are not being documented in the data collection. Uh, we can also take one more example, such as girls' education. That we are saying that girls' dropout rate is up to 57% in India at the high school level, and this is data by UNICEF. So, despite of lots of scholarship schemes to encourage the retention rate of girls in school, uh, government is failing to have the impact, like have that development of retaining girls in the school at the high school level. But there are other reasons which are not there in data, such as early marriages or menstruation, hygiene facilities which are not available. So government should understand that these are the reasons as well while planning for retention of girls in school. It is not just infrastructure. So other social issues are intervened, and that is missing in the data because data collection is not inclusive. Uh, Other than that, I cited like I can also say that water scarcity is one more issue of girls dropping out of schools, because we see water scarcity is as an environmental issue, but environment and gender goes hand in hand, and we should emphasize on that, because many of women are giving their time to fetch water, and that's why they are not going to schools. And this data goes missing from many of the surveys or data collection processes of governments. So with these two examples, I want to emphasize on inclusion of marginalized youth in data collection, increasing their representation, and this can turn the scenario of development policies into like more inclusive data and more impact. I would like to go ahead here to June. Like June will be giving more importance to challenges in this, and how data values manifesto can help us to go through these issues. So June, mic is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayuri. My name is Jun. I work as a software engineer. I originally come from Seoul, South Korea. Now I'm based in New York City. And then along with Mayuri, part of the Data Values Advocate. So when it comes to the challenges that the young people face in data agency, here are just some of the challenges that we as young people face. For a lot of us, we have problems when it comes to connectivity and accessibility. In some cases, we feel that youth voices are not being included by political leaders. There's also what I call data deficiency feedback loop. Basically, when you are not being included in the data in the first place, then it is also very unlikely that the policies that will be based on data will be beneficial for you. Meaning that there is a negative vicious cycle where if you were excluded from the data at the first place, that exclusion could perpetuate in future cycles. So those are some of the challenges that we feel that young people face. And the best way we feel that we could help ensure agency is actually through the Data Values Manifesto. So what is Data Values Manifesto? Well, it is a set of values that all these people around the world have gathered and decided on. And the common theme is to demand a fair data future. And that is the essence of the Data Values Manifesto. You could actually take a look. It's only 5 key points. Number 1, support people to shape how they're represented in data. Number 2, invest in public participation for accountability. Number 3, democratize data skills for greater equality. Number 4, create cultures of transparency, data sharing, and use. And number 5, fund open and responsive data systems so that all people share in the benefit of data. And apart from working as a software engineer, I also have a youth advocacy group called Youth for Privacy, where we host educational sessions to young people around the world on the values of privacy. And I don't know if you could see this right now, but this is the set of cards that the Data Values Project created that was distributed during its launch of the project. And this card, I felt, was a very good way to create conversations among young people on how they wanted their data to be treated with. And based on our workshops that we had across a lot of places, like we had workshops in Buenos Aires, Seoul, New York, etc., we found that the Data Values Manifesto accurately reflected what young people thought about how they wanted the data to be treated and what kind of value system they wanted regarding their personal data. So we believe that Data Values Manifesto would actually be a really good trust building mechanism to make sure that you can gain back trust among people and among populations where it was not included in the data in the first place. And another benefit of the Data Values Manifesto is that it is very like value-based, but also action-based. It does not care how you arrive at those kind of values. Each of these 5 points in the manifesto show you a clear path, a clear action that you could take to gain public trust when it comes to your data. So using the Data Value Manifesto, what could you do to bring diverse voices in data? One of the key aspects of Data Values Manifesto is that it could start in a local scale. So even in the smallest county or district, even in a unit, for example, in like schools and families and your workplaces. Another way you could do it is that in terms of the data decision-making processes, in order to foster that sense of transparency and openness, what a lot of organizations could adapt is that they could include these devil's advocates, where even if you might not believe in the arguments, you just give those kind of reverse arguments. So just for the sake of opening up conversations, just for the sake of questioning some shared beliefs. In those kind of like exercises where you pick on a person to actually be a devil's advocate, could actually foster cultures that respects data and privacy and also challenges some of the common norms. And finally, in terms of bringing diverse voices in data, also it needs to be bi-directional. Outreach is dependent on the fact that you not only reach out to the marginalized community, but also you have to listen to what they have to say. Data values without any kind of conversation is good as not having that conversation in the first place. So in order to bring diverse voices in data, there needs to be a bi-directional cross-section of conversations. Yeah, so do you have any questions for me and Mayuri so far?
Thank you so much, June and Mayuri. That was really powerful. And we've got some questions actually flowing in the chat, so we could start with those. And so we have 4 questions. We can run through them, all of them. I think the last is more of a comment rather than a question. But the first question is from Jerry Person. How do we suitably promote inclusive data systems while maintaining confidentiality and protecting owners' rights on sensitive data? June, I don't know if that's a question that you could take, and then Mayuri, you can take the second question.
Yeah, I could take the first question about inclusive data systems while maintaining confidentiality and protecting the user's privacy. I feel like there might be like 2 questions answers that could be done. First could be like technical in a sense. There are technical ways of maintaining privacy and security of the data. For example, if you are focused on privacy, you could use these like differential privacy, for example, or other privacy preserving technologies when you gather data. I feel those are more of a technical aspect. On the other hand, there's also the culture aspect as well. If there is a suitable culture of openness and also trust built by each statistical organizations, then or any organization that's collecting data, in a very clear delineation of how those kind of data being collected will be used, then that will be a one way to address that kind of inclusive data system while making sure that those data are handled with care and confidentiality. I hope that answers your question.
Thanks, John. Mayuri, maybe next coming to you, Mayuri, just talking about cultural diversity. How do you address that? Because that could lead to problems in collecting sensitive data for inclusion.
Yeah, so as you must have seen in the data values manifesto, it says in the very first point that we should work to support people from the communities to understand the data, or we should make them like we should have data literacy for marginalized communities so that they can ensure that their data is used correctly, their privacy is taken care of. That is the one thing that manifesto says. Other than that, I have some uh, like suggestions or ideas where community research or community led research can help make data more inclusive with the cultural diversity and other intersections, as I mentioned earlier. So that can take care of that sensitive collection of sensitive data. Community research would help other NSOs and even governments to understand the realities, like grassroots realities, and that will automatically, like, academic research and community research can go hand in hand to, for the taking further steps to solve people's issues. I hope that helps.
It does. Thank you so much, Mayuri, just taking that community action research perspective. One question for the two of you, and this is a question from Rachel. How do we ensure that we include all groups and not just those who are the most vocal when it comes to inclusion? Because there's also a risk that the vocal ones get the space to be heard, and then the less vocal ones don't get a space to be heard. So how do you ensure we balance that for both of you?
Yeah, you could go first.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay, thank you. Yeah, so in terms of ensuring that we include all groups and not just those who are most vocal, I feel like the best way to do it is two ways. First is, if you are only including the voices that are most vocal, I feel that also means that you haven't been actually looking at which of the data was included and which of the voices were not included. If you were, let's see, bidirectional in your approach, and if you are actually like talking not only to the voices that you heard, but also reaching out and actually seeing what are the possible spectrum of voices out there, then it shows that, in order to prevent those most vocalist voices from crowding the room, you need to actually like pick out the voices that you're not being heard. So I think that sense of intentionality is definitely a key part of this.
Over to you, Mayuri.
Yeah. So, like, most vocals are already in the power positions, maybe. So we should also think about those who are not in the power, and how can we transfer that power to the marginalized or those who are unheard. So that can be our agenda or our work to do that we should transfer this power from powerful to powerless, and that comes through making this process more democratic, more inclusive, and giving the agency to the hands of like owners of the data. Like marginalized people are the owners, so we should work on data literacy, which will help people speak up, because I have seen in this in my action research processes, where we give girls, like women and girls in rural tribal villages, the skills of data, and they do their own research on in their communities, and suddenly they have that internal change where they start talking about their issues, and they become vocal. So I guess data literacy is a tool where we can transfer this agency to people. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, June and Mayuri. That was really interesting, and thanks for your intervention. We have one more question, but unfortunately, just because we need to move to the next agenda item, we won't answer it verbally, but I'll encourage you, June and Mayuri, to respond to the question on the chat, if you can. Thank you so much. I want us now to move to the next and the last part of this session, where we will have a 20-minute dialogue between a young person from Nepal, Bipana Dakal, who is a youth activist, and Mr. Keshab Kumar from the population sector at the Central Bureau of Statistics in Nepal. So we'll be reflecting on, what the NSO has done, but also what a young person like Bipana has been doing, but also would like to see more done when it comes to statistics. So I have a round of questions for you too, and I'll start with you, Mr. Keshab. And then after Mr. Keshab, I'll come to you, Bipana. So Mr. Keshab, as someone who works on population statistics, in what ways can the NSO create that open, trustworthy, and inclusive data systems that supports people's agency? You're on mute, Mr. Keshab.
Thank you, Karen. Hello, everyone. Good morning from Nepal. I am working as a director in National Statistical Office here in Kathmandu. I am very much pleased to participate in this Stats Café, and it is my first participation actually. Thank you for giving this platform. Actually, making the agency in data and making the data trustworthy and inclusive, we can do many things. We can actually do right from the start of any data collection process. We can make the data collection process very wider, actually collaborative, and it should be from the initial stage, like from making the tools, from determining on what questions we are going to ask in some data collection activities like censuses or surveys. Then we can incorporate the requirement of the marginalized communities. Actually.
Throw away your specs.
And
I didn't throw them. Just that when I wake up late, I just rush out of the.
All right, please, please. Thank you.
And as regards to making the agency, we can also do that. We can just make the data collection activities very transparent, so that people can trust the process and they participate. They participate willingly. And the other thing we can use is just we can propose such kind of data collection systems that are targeted to actually the marginalized groups. In the previous discussions, the participants asked that how can we make not vocal persons inclusive. So that is actually very crucial question actually. Because the marginalized groups, they are not always vocal, and they are always, there is a chance that they always left behind in the process. That's why we have to speak up from their side. So we have to address what the possible solutions for them will be from the very start of the data collection process. So we have to propose such kind of systems that we can include their needs or their aspirations, and by just by collaborating with them, or by giving them some kind of floor, or just by making the process aware, by creating some awareness programs to them actually. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Keshap, for that. So creating more awareness, but also developing tools and sensitization on the surveys and the censuses. I'll come to you, Bipana. You're a young activist in Nepal, and what are some of the practical ideas and actions that you think the CBS or other NSOs in that matter can do to ensure that the voices of the youth are heard in data and in statistical processes?
Thank you so much for having me here. And like addressing this question, one very bright question comes to my mind: what exactly inclusion means to us? We talk a lot about youth inclusion. We talk a lot about making platforms accessible for young people, but is that thing being actually implemented? Are we exactly looking forward to the fact that there are diversities of young people who are left behind, with the matter of fact that just handful of young people are coming forward and making their voices heard? So that's one serious question to be addressed right here, right now. And I think some of the ways with which the CBS and other NSOs can incorporate young people more into these spaces, first would be addressing the fact that accessibility should be there. For example, these spaces like this should not just be limited to a young person like me. I feel privileged that I have access to platforms as such, from where I can gather knowledges or even speak on my behalf or my community. But there are a lot of young people who are not able to do so. So it should be made sure that the accessibility of resources or even platforms and opportunities should be there for young people, so that they can directly or indirectly participate in making these spaces even more meaningful and efficient as well. And with that, another one would be utilizing these spaces to provide or increase their skills, to provide trainings for young people. A lot of people might not have the idea about what exactly are we talking in terms of building a greater agency in regard to data, or what it means to in terms of youth engagement when it comes to promoting safer access to data utilization, maybe in other terms also known as safe internet uses, safe data uses, your rights, your privacy to it. So all these things, if young people would be able to have certain trainings, or they would have, they would inherit or kind of like get skills on these terms, then it would be much and be vocal about it, being pre-prepared about what they have to offer to the platform as well. And another thing would be definitely eradicating tokenism and window screening. So a lot of time it happens that just for the sake of youth participation, personally, even I have experienced that thing that in a lot of spaces, our voices are there just for the sake of youth inclusiveness and participation. And it does not last longer. The sustainability factor that should be there is really lacking. And I think if that factor is also much more looked after by different agencies, then it would be so easier for us to be appreciated, or even be considered that, okay, our voice, our the thing that we are doing really matters, and this can bring change. So if we are able to bring up these smaller actions into into play, or can even incorporate from this day beginning, I think it would be better for not just for like the CBS and different NSOs playing huge role in it, but also from a perspective of an individual. It would be much more better to incorporate all these multi-stakeholders approaches with young people, not just being there, but thoroughly being a part of it from the beginning to the end. So yeah, I think these are something that should be addressed as a matter of fact in terms of like urgencies or necessities.
Thank you, Bipana. Very powerful in terms of, not tokenistic, not doing it just to tick the box, but actually meaningfully engaging the young people. Back to you, Mr. Keshab, and just speaking from what Bipana said around meaningful engagement, how is the population sector at CPS ensuring that marginalized groups, so beyond the youth, other marginalized groups, are heard, have a say in data collection, use, and management? You're on mute.
Sorry, actually, to incorporate all the views from the bottom level, actually, before conducting even population census 2021 round, actually we organize different provincial level and local level seminars and awareness programs, so that we could gather the user needs from the bottom up approach actually. And in the data collection phase, we just we recruited about 50,000 young persons to involve in our data collection process, and that was actually basically on free competition basis actually. So for the first time, we changed our hiring process, and we just gave them chance to participate in even the data collection and monitoring activities. Apart from that, our data processing process, we also involved young persons in our data processing process, like coding and entering the data even in our central office. So we have done our best to include them in our data generation process. Apart from that, just to give data for each marginalized communities. From this time, we have just dropped the sampling method in census. In our previous censuses, we adopted sampling techniques for some of the characteristics of the population. So we thought that we want to give data in very much disaggregated level up to the ward level. The ward is our lowest administrative region, lowest administrative area of our country. There are 6,743 wards in total, out of 753 local level. So we want to produce data in the disaggregated level. That's why we just adopted full census count. The other thing we adopted in our data collection activities was we formed different kind of steering committees from central to even up to the ward level, so that if any marginalized communities are there, if they are to be included, then the ward facilitation committee, they just helped us to incorporate, to include those persons in the census counting process. It is true that if the marginalized are not counted, if they are just under enumerated in the counting process, definitely there will be no data for them. That's why we gave high priority so that they could participate in the census taking process. That's why we form the world level census facilitation committee. And now to make the marginalized communities to just to heard their voices, actually we also conducted different kinds of high level as well as the provincial level other meetings. Particularly we did in the high level, we did different kind of meetings with our constitutional bodies. There are many constitutional bodies that are actually dealing with the marginalized and the excluded communities. So we talk with them, and we also taken their views and their suggestions as well in our census taking process. Similarly, we have just there are many kind of disparities and many kind of exclusion in our society. So that are like there are many kind of caste and many religion, and similarly there are many languages. So in order to capture even the different caste, we just actually we coded all those castes in our census data processing, and we are in the phase of just publishing the results in coming months. Similarly, we have included a very different kind of questions for targeting for women. Actually, in the household level, we have asked if there are any households that are just that are conducting any household based small enterprises, and that is exclusive of agriculture. So, and similarly we have asked female ownership of household assets in the household level. And even in the disability sector, actually we could not do the Washington group questionnaire in our census, but we have included all the options that are just categorized by our act, Disability Act. And in the coming days, probably we will also do the Washington group questionnaires, and we have administered that in our ongoing survey. We are conducting now Living Standard Survey 4th round, and we have included Washington group questionnaire in that one. And probably in the near future, probably we will do the disability survey as well from our office. Similarly, we are just planning to conduct finish the groundwork for doing that one, and that will be really a milestone in this region, I think so. So these are the different areas that we are just working to include the excluded group in Nepal's case, actually. Thanks for now.
Thank you. Thank you. That's very elaborate and very detailed. Good work you're doing. One question for you, Bipana, and then I'll have one last quick question for you two. So Bipana, as someone who plays an integral role in the data values campaign and also as a data activist and enthusiast, why should the NSO incorporate personal agency and the data values manifesto in their processes?
Yeah, as being someone who has been with the Data Values Manifesto from the beginning and gone through each and every words, and then collaborated with other young people from around the world, one thing which really touches me, or one thing which really provokes me to be on its behalf, would be how it uses its multidisciplinary approach in order to include all these sectors of data, so it would work together better for any sort of work that we are targeting in terms of building up greater or an efficient data agency. So be it CBS or any other agencies, I think it's really essential for us to look into or to deep dive into the approaches that the manifesto itself introduces, talking or highlighting the interdisciplinary approach that I recently mentioned. Not just limiting it with one people's perspective or one community's perspective, but also elaborating it with different multi-stakeholders approaches, be it young people, be it someone from the private sector, be it someone including people from the governments or people from different community levels. So I think this is one really good characteristics which I think would be really efficient for us to learn or probably get something from the manifesto itself. And another thing would be it would also I believe that it also gives us a more broader sense or approach to how exactly other bodies or how our collaborators or other countries are exactly using different methods in order to prosper the work when it comes to data privacy or accountability overall. So counting from a young person's voice to expanding it to greater horizons, including the different government agencies and other big bodies, I think it's the kind of diversity that the manifesto itself provides is something which should be there to learn and to apply back into our work. And why it is needed to take that action right now would be the fact that it also provides us space to connect this global approach of working together or moving forward with one goal of building a better and safer space for data uses. So I think this is something which not just one body in particular can learn or can get from the data manifesto itself, but together as a whole, different stakeholders should be getting this knowledge that this promotes globalization, which is essentially like a really greater need for today's overall scenario, and also promotes the one goal that we all together are marching forward to or working together with. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Vipana. So one last question for you two. I'll call it the parting shot question, so it will be short and very specific in terms of next steps. So and I'll start with you, Mr. Keshab, what should the NSOs in this room, also reflecting on Nepal, what can the NSOs do better to engage and involve young people, but also have inclusive data systems?
As regards to doing the important role for including the marginalized groups, one thing we can do is we can make the access to data equitable to all the actually excluded groups actually. And another thing, by nature, the excluded groups are actually not very much vocal, and they are not usually they live in the far flung of the country, and usually they are illiterate people, and maybe they are socio-economically they may be very backward, so they may not have the right kind of access. So we have to design such kind of media to reach out to them. So we need to reach out to them to make the data useful for them. So we have to design such kind of systems, and the data access systems that are just suitable for urban areas may not be suitable for the rural areas, or may not be suitable for the illiterate persons. So we have to design such kind of methods. Maybe one thing we can do is we can just introduce, someone was just suggesting in the chat box that we can make some kind of curriculum school level curriculum to data literacy. So that is also a good suggestion. We can incorporate data literacy programs in the school curriculum. Though there are some chapters in school curriculums like health and population in Nepal's school curriculum. We can update that, or we can introduce some short data literacy education curriculum to them, and we can make them aware of how they can use the data better. Another thing, we can just use local media. We have many FM radio stations and other social networking sites as well. Social networking sites may not be useful for the very marginalized group. They may not be using that, or they don't know maybe how to use that. We can use local FM to just educate them how they can use and how they can participate in the data generation process, as well as data use, how they can use and just raise their concerns to the concerned authorities actually. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Keshab. I think you've sort of tried to also answer some of the questions that we have in the chat, so that has been good. Vipana, coming to you and thinking, from a youth perspective, what should NSOs do? And I think you could also touch on some of the questions that have come. I think the factors that encourage youth to participate as you reflect on what the NSOs need to do.
Yeah, so adding on to what Mr. Keshab just stated, I think, yes, it's really essential for us to look into the dimension of accessibility. And to make it more specific, I think having youth representation from different communities in the board, which work in the board of CBS, or, for example, advisory boards, or maybe ambassadors boards. So those young people who are not able to be up there in front would be able to be motivated somehow by seeing the representation of a young people being there and being a voice for them. It has worked a lot for me in many spaces, because, for example, I might not be able to be in every spaces here and there, right? So if I see a young person who is out there in that space and raising the question or voices that I have particularly faced, or the problems that I have faced, it makes me really motivated, as well as gives me a sense of inclusion overall. So I think more collaboration with CBS and other NSOs, as well as young people. It is really needed for us young people to be on the board, not just limited to 1 or 2 meetings that we usually have, like 1 or 2 discussions, but rather making it more sustainable. Any touch points afterwards, or maybe working on together on a certain project plan, or probably action plan, which we can together come up and then implement it better for young people to access it. And another thing, coming up to the question, I think some of the factors which motivates young people to be on the space would be definitely considering the fact that we encouraging, or we motivating young people to be up in the front. As I already state, not just promoting the term tokenism, but also the fact that young people are there not just for the sake of name or ticking the box, but they are heard. We should be making sure that they are heard if they are invited in any spaces. Their time commitment, the effort that they put at any sort of advocacy and activism is heard and is appreciated. And giving that thing, or also like including them from the start of any sort of initiative, not just kind of putting everything on their arms at the last moment and giving it the name of participation. I think it's really motivating for young people like us to have that collaborative space in where our age is not questioned, our experience is not questioned, or we are not looked down just on the basis that we do not have much experience, or people from someone working in that sector for so long are compared with us in any terms. There should not be any comparison. That kind of ideas and the knowledge that we bring to the table should be, if it is encouraged and appreciated partly, then I think that's the most basic and the most like easiest way we can encourage youth participation foremost.
Great. I couldn't have put it better. I think this has been a very nice and interesting panel, and I want to thank Mr. Keshap and Bipana for that. Well, we've run out of time, unfortunately, and I know we still had some questions in the chat which we were not able to address. So I'd request ESCAP team if we can have these questions so that we can respond to them, especially your question, Yontan, on what are some of the best practices on training enumerators on collecting data on disabilities and other forms of exclusion, and also the policy question from you, Mele. But it's been a pleasure having this session with all of you, starting from you, Rachel, June, and Mayuri, and then Mr. Keshap and Bipana. It's been a great pleasure having you in this discussion. I also want to give a big thanks to the participants for your active engagement, for your active and very thought-provoking questions. I've really enjoyed moderating this session, and I've enjoyed listening to all the speakers in this session. So I think we've come to the end of this session, and I want to thank you all again, and I want to wish you all a nice rest of your day and a good evening for those who are in the, going to have a rest this evening. So thanks again also to the Stats Cafe and the ESCAP team for hosting us. We always enjoy joining your sessions, and we learn a lot from the ESCAP Stats Cafe series also. So it's a goodbye from me, and also a goodbye from my speakers. Thank you so much.